views expressed on this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers, and are not necessarily those of this station, its management, or other advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.
Get ready for a game changer. Sarah Westall is bringing you Business Game Changers Radio. Sarah will bring you leading experts, visionaries, and newsmakers who provide the best commentary on big issues and cutting-edge innovations. Sarah's 20 years as a business executive will help you think like an entrepreneur with expertise, energy, and attitude. Now here's your host, Sarah Westall.
Welcome to Business Game Changers. I'm Sarah Westall, and you're listening to Conscious Business Radio on the Transformation Talk Radio Network. Today we have a fun interview. I'm hoping you're ready for your mind to expand as we talk to Futurist Dr. Elliott Maynard. We're going to talk about all sorts of fun things. We're going to talk about how he believes this is the best time in history to be alive. In fact, I share that sentiment. I think it's just an amazing time to be alive. Yes, we have a lot of issues, and we have a lot of issues that we need to take care of. But the bright spot of that is that we're becoming aware of the issues. I'm not sure if those issues are so new as much as we're all starting to wake up and realize these issues exist and that we need to take control of our society, our communities, and make a difference and get it back on track. But also the amazing advances in technology and science and energy and medicine that we're just on the cusp of it hitting our society and how great it could be. Yeah, there's always a dark side to technology and advancement, but there's so much up potential. And so we're going to talk about all that. And he's going to talk about some esoteric concepts, and it's a fun interview. So I hope you get ready for this. And we're going to welcome Dr. Elliott Maynard to the show. Hi, Elliott. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Sarah.
You defined what a futurist is. And so I wanted you to come on and talk about all these really fascinating subjects that you really dive into and you look at and where humanity is going and where we've been and trying to tie it all together with science and everything else. So first I want you to define for me tell me what drives you to be a futurist.
Well, it's a sort of thing that it's a blessing and a curse. Ever since I was a child, I remember in grade school, one of my teachers asked me what I would like to do, and I said I would like to leave a mark on this world, and I also would like to meet the first visitors from outside of Earth. But I'd be frightened at that thought. And also, I devoured science fiction books. I've got a sort of a fascination with the future, and I've actually developed a whole new operating system for humans based on the fact that we've gone through endless cycles of kill or be killed, survival of the fittest, the rise and fall of empires, the destruction of forests to build ships and churches and edifices to the gods, and on and on. And so I said, okay, we need a whole new operating platform. And I created one which essentially encourages everyone to come in contact with this 0-point information field, which I call the quantum field.
Okay, interesting. So what about that? How does that change, or, how does that change human beings to be better?
Well, the intuitive senses, gut feelings, you want to call it psychic abilities, have been very high on the survival scale before the Industrial Revolution, only 200 or 300 years ago. And now, at that time, the intuitive senses would keep you alive. They would possibly keep your family fed when you outsmarted the saber-toothed tiger, et cetera, et cetera. And so now, with the way society, electronic technology especially, has transformed us, we have neglected to embrace those and celebrate those wonderful intuitive senses. In my world, we have children learning about this and practicing little exercises, and this could go all the way to the White House, which might have at some point a Department of the Future and perhaps a Department of Psychic Technology. All great leaders in the world have been, most all of them have been guided by psychic advisors, even though this is a little bit under the radar. It's there in the history.
What do you mean it's there in the history? Like they actually consciously talk about it and document it?
Yes, a couple of examples. If you start to look at some of the written history about General Patton, when he was in Europe, he was in certain villages, and he had past life memories of being there. And this is written around here and there somewhere. Another interesting story is the reason that Napoleon lost the Battle of Waterloo was that Napoleon would sit in his tent and go out of his body and view the battlefield from a helicopter viewpoint. However, he didn't know the Duke of Wellington could do this also.
Oh,
and that's also written about, yes.
Well, so is it documented other leaders as well? I mean, is it a pattern that it's pretty common pattern that we see? I think
absolutely. And I worked in the Middle East, so I happen to know that in the Kingdom of Kuwait for a year and a half, I was one of the few Americans as a research scientist working with 1,200 other technicians and scientists from all over the world. And what I learned was that the Kuwaitis use Bedouins to screen visitors' trunks and belongings and all of these things because they're psychic and they vet people. And the Israelis also do this, even though this isn't really public knowledge. And that's why they have one of the best psychic screening systems there.
That's really fascinating. It gets back to that CIA program that, what was it, Project...
Men Who Stare at Ghosts.
Yeah, and that was to make fun of it, right?
Well, it's really quite a fun movie, and this is not far-fetched. Believe me, I've had contacts over the years with many people who are psychically talented in various ways, and they've worked for the government, and this is how I know about it, by direct contact with them and conversations. Do
you think people can be psychic, but they just maybe great leaders and things just kind of feel the energy of the room and kind of understand where things are going, but might not be conscious of their ability to, I mean, they know they can kind of feel things, but they're not psychic in the way that we think of psychics? Do you know what I'm saying?
That's really a good point. Oh, absolutely. And I have a garage mechanic we have a place over in Central Maine, and I grew up as a child in that area. And there's a mechanic there that he's intuitive, and and many mechanics are like this. And they'll sort of be quiet for a minute, and they'll say, well, maybe this is the problem. Have you tried this? And this happens the same way with housewives and teachers. And all it takes is a small step to begin to realize, oh, my intuitive senses just gave me the answer to that problem. And when you flick the switch of that the conscious interaction of you and bringing things down from the higher, more wisdom and more creativity, this flow begins to open up for you. So consciously, and you've stressed this so much in your business interviews. I've seen this mentioned 2 or 3 times. You call it conscious business or
mindfulness.
Having the consciousness, the awareness is the key.
Well, you work with top scientists and thinkers all over the world. I was really impressed with the names of the people that you work with. Are you noticing a pattern across the world forming? Are people starting to think differently and the paradigms are changing?
Oh, yes. And this is the whole, to me, this is like a dream come true, because many people, good people that I know, have been wanting change. They have been predicting change. The interesting thing is when you ask for something, you don't always get it in the shape and and format that you recognize. Just see what happened on Inauguration Day. And so when people get that change right in their lap, all of a sudden they go through those different stages of frustration, anger, striking out, and then they eventually get with the program. It would be so nice if people would just not be afraid of the future and step on to that pathway, that moving pathway into the future, even if they just are very quiet and listen. And they then cease becoming part of the problem and part of the solution. And it's that kind of positive energy is very addicting. It's very pleasing. It makes people happy and feel confident and safe.
Well, but you have to admit, we're more on the edge. We like that change. We like to find it and, see it. But if you weren't always studying it and really looking for it and trying to understand it, and you were doing something else, and so you didn't really understand what was going on around you, I kind of think that, because I've talked at different conferences where, we talk about things 2 to 3 decades out and stuff. And one of the things I'm seeing is a lot of fear, because I don't think that people understand where we're going, and they don't understand the basics. They think a lot of it is magic, and it scares them.
Yes, and this is just part of what I call the human condition. It's an inertia from old paradigms, and just like those football players and soccer players run through those networks of nets and tires, they get tangle-footed in the old paradigms, and these paradigms go way back, hundreds of years before the Industrial Revolution, and they're still stuck in them. Religious paradigms, belief paradigms, social paradigms, political paradigms, business paradigms. And it's hard to get out of, you can't see the forest for the trees when you're in the middle of this thing. The idea is to get above it, above the drama, the vortices of drama, and try to see the situation and what's really going on. And when you consciously start to try this and then begin to do it, your life, again, will start to change and go from being more linear to what I call quantum, where magical things start to happen for you. And I know you and many of your listeners have experienced this. That's the proof. That's all that matters.
Well, it's a much more exciting existence, right? When you look at things from more.
Oh, yeah.
It's a fun way to go. But I can kind of see there are some scary elements in our current world, and not because the change isn't exciting, but because you don't know how other people are going to respond to all this change. It's kind of scary watching people get so frightened and angry.
Well, in the book I cite a very interesting phenomenon, which is called invincible defense technology. This term was coined by Dr. John Hagelin, who is head of the Maharishi School of Business, which is very interesting. He's a nuclear physicist, John is, but he also is trying to teach business people to use more intuitive and psychic tools. They use that flying thing, which is kind of a bad PR deal. But his research has shown that when groups are set up to pray for a certain number of patients, half of patients in the study with a fairly large number, that those people, these are Catholic nuns, Buddhist priests, Jewish, leaders, and all praying for these patients that they hadn't seen or known in other parts. This is a quantum phenomena, and he has shown statistically that the violence has gone down in certain areas of the world. This has resulted in Ecuador actually has a group in training to be better, more powerful meditators. And what his concept is, when you get down to the quantum level, you start to be able to remove the causes of conflict. And so this is why it's so important to give our leaders prayer, meditation, light, whatever you want to call it. Just give them unconditional support. And then if you have a problem, you can contact them or work through the process.
Yeah, because the last thing they need is to be kicked around the entire time they're trying to do stuff. Can you imagine?
Well, yes, and how many people would really be able to take on the presidency of a large country like the U.S.? I mean, it requires an amazing, not only just an amazing president, but a team, and then dealing with the opposing groups and trying to find a common grounds. And once you find that common grounds, a commonality, things will start to settle down, and you can find a pathway. I like to create win-win situations, but I say, look, if you can create a win-win-win, and in the quantum realm, you can think about this, to create a win to the X power infinite. Wow.
When you call this quantum thinking, is that the same thing as future science thinking, or is it different?
What I call quantum thinking simply means that you learn to get to that 0 point. You can do this through meditation. I play the electric violin, and so I find that music easily puts you into that zone. It's in that zone, which athletes talk about many times, football, basketball especially, time and space are not the same as in the linear kind of mindset. And when you get into that zone, the past, the present, and the future are all there at that point. And the more you can stay in that zone, the more you kind of absorb osmotically future thinking and future perspective. And that's how it works for me, and I know anybody can do this if they put their mind to it.
And it's hard to stay there for athletes. I know when they get there, it just suddenly they're playing amazing and they're in the zone, but to stay there consistently is very difficult.
Yes, but like anything else, learning to use a keyboard, playing the piano perhaps, you need to be, or writing, you need to start doing it and spending a little time. And as you do that, you'll all of a sudden shift into a new step. And then you work there and do this, and it becomes easier and easier. And the payoff is something that the kind of things that have happened to me personally and people I know who are on this kind of pathway. Sure, you probably have a number of these things. They begin to embrace this new mindset, and there's a lot more happiness. You learn not to go to get sucked into negative vortices. My wife has a saying, when somebody starts to dump a big, story on you about their mother or their grandmother that's sick or they're dying or something, you just say, well, you don't want to say this to those kind of people, but if they have a problem that's kind of silly, you say, look, that's not my monkey and not my circus. And you simply move out. And you can help them. If you want to help them, just put light on them and be their friends. It's that simple.
Yeah, because when you wallow in negativity, it doesn't work. But I always call it, when you in that quantum zone, I call it you become one. I say you become one with the, like if my daughter plays hockey, or when you become one with the ice, or you become one with the racket. I don't know. I always say you become one, like you're completely connected to it.
That's a perfect example, what you just said.
Well, so now what is future science thinking?
I didn't coin the term future science, but I did come up with the term future science technology to explain, the books I've written explain how when you take something, let's take our most leading edge medical technology, and then you put it together with some medical intuitives. The medical intuitives are people who are actually trained and credentialed, some of them at this, they would sit there quietly in the operating theater, and they would focus their energies to keep the operating team focusing, together. They would focus on the patient so that the patient would be stable. And it's been proven that you can actually shorten the recovery time. And of course, in supporting the surgical team, you're coaching them at their best. And this is a nonlinear. It's a quantum function, because you can also be sitting halfway around the world on the phone, and this happens all the time with healing technologies and people that work this way. This is a quantum function because it's not linear. It just happens, and it's very hard to put words, which are kind of old paradigm, to describe experiences and feelings and phenomena like we speak about.
Well, I know that when you go to different cultures, different environments with different people, there's some where you just feel like you're free, like I can do anything. And other ones, I just feel so bogged down, like the people are so negative. They don't think anybody can do anything, themselves or me. And it's so hard to get anything accomplished. But you get into another mode with other people who their minds are free, anything's possible. And it's amazing what you can do. It's just a different mindset.
Yes, it is. And there was a book written maybe 15 years ago called about the cultural creatives. These are people throughout the U.S. and the world that they don't have particular necessarily political or scientific agendas, but they're determined to do some good. You asked about this earlier. I don't know. It's something that kind of begins to become a part of you, and doing good for other people, but also taking good care of yourself is probably one of the most spiritual and important things anyone can do for their lives.
Yeah, I teach an ethics course, and one of the paradigms of ethics, theories of ethics, is the highest level you can achieve is when you equally take care of yourself first, then you can devote yourself to taking care of others. Below that is taking care of others. Above that is taking care of yourself and others.
Yes, you're absolutely right on that. I've learned that lesson and I've had mentors tell me that. And yes, it's very important because, what is it? Charity begins at home.
Yeah, you
that
can't.
Sort of thing. You need to take care of yourself and your family, and your responsibilities. If you don't do that, and this is a hard lesson for me, but I learned somewhere along the way that I needed to face the snakes of the day, the challenges of the day. Not only that, but I would set up the worst one, and do it first. Make a little list the night before in my office, and next morning come in, and there it was, and just go for it. Bring it on.
Then you can just tackle anything.
That helps.
Well, let's get into some of these cool science stuff that you are looking into. You really dive into Tesla technology, and not Tesla the company, but Tesla the scientist that is no longer with us. So he's just a genius. He specifically had the multi-wave oscillator, which was a healing system based.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Could you explain that? And is this technology being used in some places, do you think? Explain it first.
Absolutely. I've been, excuse me?
Please explain it, what it is.
What was
first.
the last part?
And I'm wondering if it's being used in the world.
Yes, it is. The MWO, so-called, by the man that invented it, Likovsky, is called the MWO, multi-wave oscillator. Likovsky multi-wave oscillator. What it did, it created a series of copper coils embedded in essentially like a plastic matrix, but they were not connected. And so when you apply high voltage to it, the sparks start to jump between the rings. Imagine a kind of a planetary system down flat, just a series of concentric circles. Mm-hmm. And this creates all the frequencies. That is essentially it helps align the body and helps kind of destroy diseased organisms to a certain point. It was originally, I think the AMA outlawed it at some point.
Why?
As they did radionics, which, well, it didn't fit in their paradigm.
Did it work?
And it has come back. Oh, yes. And it has come back through the United States Psychotronics Association. I was on the advisory board for that. That's been around a long time. Intuitive sciences like dowsing, which you can also use to answer questions. And I fairly recently wrote a letter to Elon Musk, and I said to him, you might think this is really over the top, but if things like channeling, and which I regard as a science, and I cross-reference it with different sources who don't know each other, I said, what have you got to lose? Because essentially, it can answer questions that you can find answers to nowhere else, and it can save millions of dollars and years of time.
Did he respond?
Why not give it a try? No, I didn't hear from him, but anyway, that's okay.
Well, there have been a lot of people that have taken it pretty seriously, and I think a lot of governments have. I haven't seen it myself, so I don't know. I listen to people talk about it, and aren't there different people that are good at it and not as good, or is it that you can train yourself to all be good at it?
Well, actually, I've always, in my consulting business, and which was both business and personal in management consulting, we always advised our clients to find experts in the field, and if possible, credentialed experts. You would be surprised how our alternative medicine has evolved to the point where there are now credentialed people who work with after-death communication. They work with pets. People are a lot of people now, and they're so busy, have pets instead of children. These are pretty special pets. And they will help communicate between the pet and the owner to find out what the difficulty is in some of the behavioral problems they have.
Okay, so now why are they able to communicate? Where is this essence of the pet or essence of the person? Is it an energy that is just always still there as part of the 0 point energy? Or is it, you know what I'm asking?
That's it right there. Yeah, nice explanation, yes. What happened with me, my former wife and mission partner was Canadian-Japanese, and we traveled all around the world and did a lot of things and went to many spiritual sites. We attended business meetings and corporate meetings and did consulting work together. And I found out that the best approach, if you want to learn something, is go ahead and get some of the kits that are available for things like remote viewing, etc. And if you have a problem, go to one of these people. And the interesting thing about them is, since they operate in this so-called quantum realm, they can operate by phone, in other words, just anywhere in the world. And it works. It's been documented. And
now, have you done it? And what have you experienced?
Well, I myself have, interesting, let's go back to Tesla. One of the things, I do this special kind of art where I put energy of the oxyacetylene torch and the welding device into the sculptures and use ancient pieces of metal that I dig up or find underwater. And what is created is a living sculpture. Now, sometimes I used to think, Nikola Tesla, he could lie down on the couch for a few minutes, and in his mind, he could actually build a machine, run it, debug it, and then bring the concept down into the physical and build it. And I said, oh, that's incredible. What a genius. And I began to experience seeing sculptures put together in my inner vision, in my mind. And I realized, if I can do this, I thought this was something only geniuses can do, then other people can do it. And that's the only reason I share this kind of thing. And they are doing it in many cases, people like auto mechanics and others. But being conscious of this brings the whole thing up to another level for that individual. That's why it's so important.
And it's like an artist where they know what perfection is, and they just have to they just know. They know what to remove until it's perfect if they're doing a sculpture, because I don't know, it's just part of what they know. It sounds dumb.
Yes, the uncut block. And
but it's
yes,
like that in the other realm.
Yes. Okay. Let me. Could you clarify that question for me? The last part of it.
I don't think
I like it in the other room.
Oh, what I said is.
Were you talking?
What I said is, with an artist, the uncut block, but the other realm, meaning the other aspects of life, not just art, but you can do it in other aspects of life where it just is like I can't. I'm not articulating this well because I haven't. You need to be articulating this.
Well, if I look at your interviews, just a kind of a helicopter view, I can see that this transformation and being change agents and transformation, hanging 10 on that wave of transformation is probably one of the most exciting things that anyone who exists in this physical realm can do right now. This is a very, very special time in history, and I think it behooves us to put our shoulder a little bit to the wheel instead of whining. And if we have problems, we can work it out through the processes we've created.
Oh, I think it's a magical time to be alive. We're riding the wave.
Yes.
It's incredible.
Yes. And we need to feel some compassion for the other guys, too. I mean, Jesus, we've been through this, haven't we? I did when I was 2 years old, and probably a lot of times after that.
Well, we do have some things going on around the world, which is really, really difficult. We're always in a war. And
yes.
How do we get ourselves out of these negative circumstances that are plaguing us to a point where we can't be so business oriented want to make a profit so bad that the whole military complex would be a profitable bit. It just doesn't make sense. There's too many people in the war industry, the soldiers and in the military who they don't want to go to war. It's too difficult. There's too many people they love who are committing suicide. So it can't just be about that. So keep going.
Well, part of this Invincible Defense Technology program, actually, I worked with the person that started the Pentagon Meditation Club. Guess what? The Pentagon has a meditation garden in area in the center there, and I met him through a Russian scientist that a Canadian scientist put me in touch with. And they had met in St. Petersburg, where there's a Buddhist temple that isn't on the tourist maps with very, very ancient history. And so this man, he was a very interesting guy. And Ed Winchester, his name, I think he's still alive. And you see, many people are working quietly to keep things together. And we never hear about these people because they sit quietly. And probably they're the most blessed because they're doing their work. They're not getting into the vortices of emotion. And if you can raise above that emotion, you can start to see things clearly. And as you have shown in business, you can start creating a business that's fun to work in. And that's an enviable position, as you know.
Well, yeah, if you can get to a point where you just love what you're doing and then as a byproduct you're making money, you've been blessed.
Yes.
Okay, let's move on to HARP. I know you look into the HARP technology, and this is all based on Tesla technology as well. And in your book, you're talking about the HARP installations that are all over the place. Can you talk about the HARP installations, what they do, where they exist, and what's the point of them?
Yes, it's a complex situation, but there are so-called HARP installations. The one that most people know about is in Alaska and supposedly shut down now, but there are others operating in places like Norway and Australia and, many others. It's one of those black box projects, and what it involves is the grids. The electrical grid is a kind of an antenna that looks like an amateur shortwave antenna, a network in these installations, and they put high frequency, high voltage electricity through it and start to resonate the ionospheric cavity. Now, the ionospheric cavity, from my perspective, is one of the global commons. We have our water, our earth, our oceans, and the atmosphere. We all share this, like it or not. And so this is why it's very important. Within the cavity between the surface of the earth and the ionosphere, which is on the top of the atmosphere, more or less, there is a resonant cavity, and when it's energized by lightning strikes, which are occurring all around the world at any given time within this cavity, and it causes the cavity to ring like a bell and creates what is called the Schumann resonance. I believe it's about 7.4 hertz, something around there. This is the heartbeat of Earth, and all life on Earth, from humans down to viruses, are connected to this. When we start to put other kinds of frequencies into this cavity, we just don't know the long-term consequences. And just to put in
and is that what HAARP is doing? HAARP is messing around with the Earth's frequency?
Yes.
What is their point?
They're doing other things, and they're starting to try to create a better atmospheric cavity for certain military communications, all of that. These may seem like good goals in the short term, but I once consulted a group. It was one of the councils, and did some channeling, and I asked questions, and they said that they were really surprised at sort of the stupidity, the naivety of scientists messing around with the ionospheric cavity. And they also said that they had to break their protocols and actually repair it on several occasions, or repair the ozone layer, which is about in that same area, the top of the atmosphere, more or less. And that's what I have to say about it.
So they're just, they know enough to be dangerous, and they should be really careful and maybe not doing that.
Yes, and I also point out that any new technology is neither good or bad. It is the way it's used. Dynamite is a good example. Alfred Nobel invented dynamite, and of course that led to all kinds of explosive devices and war machines. But we have the Nobel Prize, you see, and the Nobel Foundation. It's a small example, but it does underscore the importance of learning about and considering the unintended consequences of any action or program.
Well, there's always a dark and a light side to technology, right? So like altering the human genome, there's a lot of light to that, but there's obviously some dark to that as well.
Well, what most people don't realize, again, is I did some pioneering work in aquaculture, giant freshwater shrimp culture, in the U.S., Puerto Rico, and Kuwait. And I find that when anything new comes up, the scientists themselves will try to criticize it first. A perfect example, these new genetically modified salmon. There's nothing wrong. These salmon have been tested, and they're perfectly good to eat. But it's the concept, they're genetically engineered. There's been no evidence to show that in that particular situation, the meat isn't perfect. And the salmon grows in about a third of the time as the wild stock to a size that's about 3 or 4 times larger than its wild counterpart. Now, what this does when you're trying to raise food is mean less water, less energy, less contamination from the wastewater, and there's nothing bad about that technology. But if you go to Monsanto, they didn't screen. They were too eager, perhaps motivated for profit, and their stockholders, and they didn't check out the unintended consequences, which I think in the long run, history will show us that perhaps the Monsanto debacle was an example to show us what can happen. And we better get our act together,
Well, if you don't know enough, you can be dangerous. But what do you think of nanotechnology? Because there's an explosion of new inventions. I mean, it's a whole world at the nano level, and the fact that we can work with the building blocks of life, right, of creation, and come up with all sorts of new and neat things. What do you think of that, the whole nanotechnology explosion?
It's very exciting, and it's a huge field. One of my mentors, Jacques Fresco, who is, I think, 97 right now, of the Venus Project, talked about nanotechnology in the 70s. And it's a sort of thing that can make self-repairing vehicles through space. It can help repair the human body or any organism, and perhaps even crops. The thing that needs to be remembered, it is a potentially very dangerous technology too, because as it can heal, it can also kill people. So you've got to be mature. A civilization has to reach a certain level of wisdom and maturity before they can handle these newer technologies.
Well, it's like nuclear weapons.
Yes.
That's nuclear energy can be pretty amazing. But
it is, and I've described how there's much better nuclear reactors available even now. The conventional nuclear plant is the design is really back there, and it takes 10 to 20 years to build a plant of that nature, like Indian Point or those. And not only that, but you have this huge cost overruns that occur, so the price often even doubles or more. And then you have the really terrible situation in Fukushima right now, which is just very recently, like 2 days ago, major radioactive sources have been detected there. Very high readings. So
what do you think they're going to end up doing with that? Are we all doomed? I mean, I shouldn't laugh.
No,
it's not funny.
No, sometimes it's been in the history. If you look at the history, people seem to need some kind of a fairly gruesome wake-up call. And I won't go any farther than that, but we have the technology to fix the nuclear situation, to clean up. It's called nuclear photodeactivation technology. It was invented by a man named Paul Brown in the 70s. It essentially used a souped-up X-ray machine to bombard, let's take radioactive fuel rods. And what it does is actually speed up the nuclear decay that occurs naturally by many, many fold, hundreds of times. In a matter of 2 or 3 weeks, they can decontaminate all the fuel rods in a nuclear facility that have been stored, and they're just something terrible that needs to be either buried or destroyed. No, it actually transmutes it.
Well, then why aren't they using it?
Natural process up.
Because that could be a solution for a lot of things, because we're burying things that need to be buried for thousands of years.
Absolutely.
It doesn't make sense.
It can take care of, it can take care of radioactive water, which comes off the plants and the cooling systems. It can take care of nuclear warheads. It can take care of medical nuclear waste, which is a huge problem right now. And I don't know. This is something we call them orphaned sciences. because they've been swept under the carpet because it wasn't. You know, these scientific establishments are pretty powerful. And of course, you've got the corporate interests and everybody else.
Well, maybe they don't want that to get out.
That's understandable.
Maybe if that gets out, then nuclear will take off as a viable energy. I mean, it'll really take off everywhere, and they don't want that because that could be scary.
Well, you know, the new pebble bed technology is much better in that the fuel cannot be used for terrorist purposes in the same way. It's just not available. And beyond that, we're coming into being able to miniaturize nuclear generators, but more importantly, we're moving toward fusion. And fusion is essentially a clean technology. It just requires a lot of high tech to get it tuned and working properly, and also contained so there's no problem of contamination.
Well, how does fusion work? What would we need?
Well, when you talk about nuclear reactors, you're usually talking about fission, and fusion is the kind of energy conversion that takes place in the heart of the sun. So we're simply, interestingly, we're copying nature. We're taking something from nature, very powerful and also very dangerous, and learning how to contain a very small sun in a way. This is not totally accurate, but it conceptually accurate. And we're learning to contain that and control it, and also make it small enough so it can be easily built, quickly built. It can be safe, and it can does not result in a lot of nuclear waste the way the fission reactors work.
Well, see, I think energy is all going to be at the nuclear or the subatomic, the nanotechnology level is what we're going to get. But have you know if you heard my show on the 0-point energy field, endless batteries?
Yes. Well, I know Tom Bearden and some of the others that he developed the first and patented nonlinear device. It's a little over unity generator. In other words, what that means is that once you start it up with a battery or something, it starts to produce more energy than it takes. And there's a whole stream of research that's been going on for years in that, too.
That's incredible. I know the 0-point energy battery concept came out of the University of Colorado, and it's patented there. And so it's real. It's really fun when you start looking at where our future is going with energy. Again, it's all nanotechnology level stuff.
I see this trend happening, and yes, the main problems with both wind and solar are that, especially with the wind, it's kind of an eyesore. It creates some problems for certain people who are sensitive to that energy, have to live near it. Those can be overcome, but I think we're going to find that those big egg beaters that we're seeing out there, and they're very expensive ones, are eventually going to be relegated to Reuben Goldberg bin. Yeah.
Well, Elon Musk came up with the solar panels now that are less expensive than roof tiles to build. Yes. So if you're building from scratch, it's cheaper to use Elon Musk's solar panels. That's going to take over the industry.
Coming right along.
Yeah, that's going to take over the entire industry.
That's what Futurists used to call wild card. I worked a lot with the World Future Society, and what Elon Musk has done is I call it quantum leapfrogging, because he's paradigm shifting. He did it, and I really, it's exciting. I envisioned even I told him a jerry can size. You know what a jerry can is? 5-gallon can that people put on their Jeeps or motorboats. And and you can stick it in your car and, bring it. Well, if they made a battery that size that a lady could carry, not too heavy, about like a carry-on suitcase, you could throw that in the back of your electric vehicle, and if you got low on fuel and couldn't find a charging station, which will happen, they'll be everywhere before we know it. But if you couldn't find it, you could just plug into that, and you'd have an extra, 50 miles or something, or 100.
Well, I think that all of our building products could be a solar generating thing, and just a byproduct of what we build with creates energy. And we're just so many more uses with everything that we do. Our pavement and our roads could all be solar generating things. But now again, in order to do that stuff, you really do have to get good with nanotechnology as well. But I think there's other energies that we can tap into with the 0 point energy. It is an exciting time to be alive. That's all I got to say. There is so much.
Absolutely.
Okay, I have. Oh, I'm hearing feedback. Did you take me off of headphones or something? Are you there?
No, I'm fine here.
Okay, I was hearing myself feedback. Okay, what I was going to say, okay, here we go. I want to now dive into, with you, some of the historical things that they're finding all around the world. They just found Queen Nefertiti's, which they believe is Queen Nefertiti in Turkey. A dark journalist, annualist, he just aired that completely explosive history-making stuff because it was a bigger find than King Tut's tomb. It hasn't hit mainstream media yet, but it can't not because it's just an incredible find. What do you think about that? And before I get into that, they aged it at 10,500 years. I mean, it's older than they realize, and that means that they had to have existed before 10,500 years to get to that point where they could make that stuff. So what do you think about this history that we're finding that shows that our history is much older than what we think, and there's these amazing finds that they're finding?
Well, this is I like to call this a shattering glimpse of the obvious, but the pieces are there, and they have been there, and very sadly, what happens often is the archaeologists themselves, and they get so caught in their old paradigms, they don't want to face the truth when the whole thing shifts. A perfect example of this, I was very skeptical of the giants, all the talk about giant skeletons and everything until I started to research it about 3 years ago.
Well, it sounds stupid, doesn't it, when you hear some of that stuff for the first time?
Yes, but if you put all the pieces together, what I found out was, and this has kind of been hanging out there before us, but you mentioned 10,000, about 12,000 years ago. Apparently, that's when Atlantis fell, and there was a war. This is not talked about much between the Atlanteans and the Lemurians. Of course, the Lemurians go back to about 35,000, somewhere in that area. And what happened was that the giants, this giant race, apparently were from the Lemurian culture. And this stands to be corrected as we find out more. But the Lemurians came and they built this huge complex of mounds, massive earthenworks that covered almost a third of the United States at one time.
We need to take a short break, and we'll be back with Dr. Elliott Maynard in a moment. Welcome back to Business Game Changers. I'm Sarah Westall, and we're talking to Dr. Elliott Maynard. And I want to remind you before we get back into the interview that you can hear us nationally. We're on the Global Star satellite radio, which plays 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And we also play 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesdays as well nationally. And then we play on Monday, of course, at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on WBLQ, which plays in New York, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, as well as Transformation Talk Radio at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and every day during the week at different times, but for sure 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So you can hear us all over the place nationally and live. But after that, it goes to podcast all over the place as well on about 100 different digital channels, streaming and in podcast. And the YouTube channel is really taking off. We started it in the beginning of December, and it's really, we have a couple of shows that are really getting a lot of play, and our other shows are as well that might not have the popular title where everybody's doing a search on it. But once I start digging in, I'm noticing that the subscribers and the listeners are really going up. So that's great. And give us a chance there and listen to it on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe so that you can, when you get on YouTube, you can hear, or it shows you our latest shows, and the newsletter. Make sure you get on that as well. You go to my website at sarahwestall.com and make sure that you put your name in for the newsletter, and you'll get that about once a week, once every week and a half now, because I'm doing so many more shows that the newsletter is going out more as well. But now let's get back to our interview with Dr. Elliott Maynard.
And they found the giant skeletons everywhere, not just near the mounds, but farmers would find them in their fields in colonial times, and they'd invite people to come see them in their wagon and have a picnic, maybe charge them a little bit of money. And sadly, the archaeologists took these away and hid them, the Smithsonian Institution. And that, to me, is like a sin almost. I mean, to do that. But archaeologists, and scientists in general often don't like their boat rocked. And you see it with Tesla. You see it with the cold fusion experiments that are now moving along very nicely. And these people have more arrows in their backs than they did in the front.
Well, yeah. Well, just even something simple like sterilizing your hands. Doctors were, there was, yes. I don't remember the doctor's name, but he was saying to doctors, you can't go from one surgery or go do a autopsy on a dead cadaver and then go do surgery with somebody. You're bringing disease. And I don't remember the doctor's name, but he was trying to educate people. And he actually was put into a mental institution and shut out and lost his everything because they didn't believe him and they thought he was an idiot. Now we look at that and go, wow, the fact that they could do that because it's so obvious to us now. But so that's happened all through history.
Yes, I think that was Lister. I think it was a French doctor, and it's so sad. I mean, he probably his work probably saved the lives of millions of people over the years because of just that idea
not
of
just millions.
being septic, sterilization. Yes. That concept wasn't known at the time.
He changed medicine. Without that, modern medicine wouldn't be what it is today.
Absolutely.
It's incredible. And he was laughed out and thought he was insane. So that happens all over the place. But these big skeletons, the history of our world is incredible. I was just telling dark journalist Daniel Litz that I hope I live to find out really. I mean, I don't know if you're ever going to know all of our history, but I hope I live long enough to have a good idea of what really happened in history and it becomes more open, because all these things they're finding is just absolutely incredible.
Well, another shattering glimpse of the obvious, as I call it, in this category. Are you familiar with the famous profile of Queen Nefertiti that you see everywhere? It was one of the statues I think when they uncovered King Tut's tomb.
Yes.
And it shows she's got this funny hat on, but look at her head. She's got the kind of skulls that are turning up in Peru and Bolivia and all these places, and they're there. I mean, they're physical evidence, and beyond a certain point, you can't fit the. They used to wrap the craniums of certain cultures would do this, Chinese and others, but no, it goes way beyond that.
Well, I was researching that. Well, I was researching that, right? 90% of them are the craniums that are deformed. And they're saying 10% of them are not. And you can tell the difference because of the skull, the fractures in the skull and not, that it's not possible. When there haven't been and when it's naturally built that way. And what they're thinking is that the leaders and the upper class, the elite, had those skulls. And so everybody wanted to be like them. And so they were altering their babies' heads to be like the elites, which is interesting because was there a whole race that's like that? Was Nefertiti like that? What's the deal there?
Apparently so, and this is why all of the the artifacts, the cultural, the writing systems, the structures that these various civilizations built, they're always talking about the gods, but the gods are different in each case. However, if you go deeper, you find that there's so many commonalities. You can't avoid logical conclusions that just are based on what you see. And that's so important, to go to the source. With the skeletons, if you start looking, you find newspaper articles from the 1700s, the 1800s, the 1900s, everywhere. And even over in the Arabian desert, they found skeletons over 40 feet. I think the biggest one is 50 feet tall.
That's absolutely incredible. But the Bible talks about the giants. The Bible talks about giants. Maybe that's what they were referring to. Yes, the Nephilim, I believe. I can't pronounce it exactly, but yes, David was a giant, and I believe they think they know where he was buried. And or Goliath, right? Wasn't it David and Goliath?
David and Goliath was the youth that was normal.
Yes. Okay.
So called. Yes, and one of the Roman emperors was also a giant, I believe. I can't remember his name.
But that's incredible. And this is starting to come out. It's always been there, but it's not. Now with the internet, it's with the internet, everybody's starting to have a collective consciousness of it, because you can't say it doesn't exist if the proof is actually there. And people are seeing it. And we know it's not made on Photoshop and those things. The scientists are too serious, and there's too many. Here's the thing that I was telling other people about this, is that there's just too many serious people who are not wacko, who are scientists and legitimate people who are serious about this, who are talking about it, for it to be there not to be something there. And if there isn't something there, then the story is, why is there so many serious, reasonable people who are into it then? You know what I mean? It's one or the other. Something weird is going on if it's not real, because there's just too much evidence.
One thing I can say about that is I've in my lifetime experiences, I've been very close to some of the best surgeons and alternative doctors and medical people, especially experimental people from Russia, from in America here in big cities. And one thing, I was very close. A former wife was married to a heart surgeon in a big city, and he was head of the children's hospital. And he let me come in and open the operating theater and a microphone so I could talk with a surgical team. And they did a open heart surgery on a 7-year-old girl who needed repair of the heart valve. And he assembled his team from basically just people he found around the hospital. And he told me, he said, I know when a patient's in trouble before they call me from the hospital. And again and again and again, I find doctors who are dousing in the back room like some kind of, they're doing kinesiology, which is just another form of dousing. And they're going through this to the point one doctor had to help him. I had a good chiropractor around, and the chiropractor had to work on his shoulder because he was pushing so hard on the, they try to force the arm down when they do that. Have you seen that?
Yep.
Yeah. It's kind of a funny story, but, again and again and again, the best doctors and healers, when you talk to them, they go in their intuitive feelings, and that's the natural gift that can be enhanced with technology.
Yeah, I was told that some of the doctors get so good that they can almost smell cancer and things like that. It's interesting.
Yes, and the best doctors, I got into a rather bad accident and broke some ribs, and I had this 75-year-old doctor from California. He was a wonderful man. And he would just come and peek in the room and watch. And I thought that was the neatest thing. I said, man, that guy's got it together. And I smashed up a shoulder blade in the back. And strangely, I went to an orthopedic surgeon. I said, well, do you need to wire that together or something? He said, nah. He put his hand on my shoulder. He said, nah. He says, those pieces are floating around. They'll come together. And I went, whoa. Wow. Because, the rule of surgeons, we used to laugh, is when in doubt, cut it out.
Oh, but, yeah.
I don't mean to beat on the establishment, but they're trained that way. And remarkably, they know when something works. A good doctor knows when something works. And if the patient says, well, I know it's crazy, but I'm doing this. And again you read about patients discovering some kind of a sort of miracle home cure based on something simple, or even older medicine, when, Big Pharma doesn't have any control over those sorts of things.
Well, my sister's a doctor, and she says that half of it's art because it just doesn't it doesn't go by textbook. It just doesn't work that way. Some does, but in general.
I'd like to comment on that. I'm very excited about the concept of bringing art into science. And, in the older medical protocols, it's like you work these doctors until they're half dead and getting no sleep and everything because I had to go through this and all of this. If you start training your doctors to start to watch their patients, listen to the patients, because if you talk to them for a little while, you begin to get a whole picture. That's where the creativity comes in. And it's not something, you can learn parts of it, but this is what makes a great doctor. It makes a great CEO. It makes a great car mechanic or inventor or scientist. And they don't like to talk about it too much, but the nice thing is doctors can now talk about these things they could not 20 or 30 years ago because they'd be, their peers would
laugh them out of the room.
And Dr. Eben Alexander, have you heard about Dr. Eben Alexander? He was a neurosurgeon who flatlined. His brain turned to mush, according to him. He came back and described what he had seen, and he tried to talk to his colleagues, and she thought he was just suffering from some kind of side effect. And he tried to talk to his pastor, and the church doesn't really want to deal with miracles if they don't have to. You'd think they'd celebrate. So he wrote a book, and he just told it where it was at, and people are listening.
Well, people are starting to figure out that the world's just not what we thought, and things are different, and it's exciting. It's exciting. I think it is. I love to learn. So to me, and talking to the top people in the world and talking to futurists like you, it's fun. Well, I just appreciate you joining the show today and giving us your wisdom and insights on so many different things. I have to have you back so we can talk about some of the other stuff, because you could talk about, and from what I've seen in your books, you could talk about almost every subject that's out there. You really dive into the edge of everything.
Yeah, I think it's been a curse and a blessing. I could tell you about that, but another time.
I'm sure it is. It's part of your need to know factor, I bet. Well, I appreciate it so much, and I hope you have a great day, and thank you for joining us.
And thank you, Sarah. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yes, I am sorry. This interview is too long to air on the radio. However, you can hear it on any of the 100 places that the podcast is playing, on my website as well, sarahwestall.com. Of course, the YouTube channel now plays all my latest interviews as well, so you could subscribe there and get it there. And my website, if you haven't visited there, you should really visit, because all of these episodes are accompanied by an article where I do some research and links to different data and information. It's always a learning vehicle for people to see different things. Even if you have different opinions than what the guest did, at least you can see different articles and see the different perspective. It's always good to look at sources, and I try to do my best at whatever we're talking about to include different sources so that you get information from reputable sources that can back up what we're saying. It's hard when you're talking to a futurist to get sources on what's going on in the future. That just doesn't really exist. But sources on what does exist now and in the past that leads to what's going to happen in the future. And, it really helps us understand what's going on. So I remind you, sarahwestall.com. You can get that. My YouTube channel, please subscribe to that. It's exploding. It started in the beginning of December, and we've had some of our shows are just really taking off, and because they're buzzwords and things, and then people are putting them in their shared videos and playlists, and so they're really taking off, and it's really giving a lot of exposure to our other ones. So for those of you who've listened to most of these shows, please go in there and subscribe and get it on YouTube as well if you're a YouTube listener. And don't forget about the newsletter, because now that I'm on 3 days a week, 4 days a week, I'm doing multiple shows now, 3 shows a week. And so my newsletter is going out once a week, once every week and a half, something like that. So my newsletter goes out a lot more with links to the different articles that I write. So remember to do that as well, sarahwestall.com. So for now, I hope everybody has an amazing day.
You've been listening to Business Game Changers with host Sarah Westall. As Sarah brings you leading experts, visionaries, and newsmakers who provide the best commentary on big issues and cutting-edge innovations. Sarah's 20 years as a business executive will help you think like an entrepreneur with expertise, energy, and attitude. And learn more about Sarah at sarahwestall.com today.